Welcome back to the Rajan Kilachan Mughal 10. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and this next session we have is entitled Words Are All We Have, with Yujoo, Janice Pariat, Leïla Slimani, and they're going to be in conversation with Prajwal Parajuly. Many of you will be familiar with his works, The Gurkha's Daughter and Land Where I Flee, and he's a judge of the 2017 International Dylan Thomas Prize. I will hand over to Prajwal to introduce the rest of the speakers. Please join me in welcoming them.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Welcome to the fourth day of the Jaipur Literature Festival 2018. I am thrilled to be in conversation with three very widely acclaimed writers. Yujoo from South Korea, Janice Pariat from India, and Leïla Slimani from France. Janice and Han have just recently come out with books, whereas Leïla had the English translation of a book in America come out about 2 weeks ago. So this is a very, very exciting time for everybody. And I would love to start this session with readings from each and every one of them, because I'd love for all of you to get a taste of how amazing these books are. Okay, I'll introduce them briefly, and then they'll give a reading. Yujoo has written 3 short story collections. She is a recipient of the Literature and Society's New Writers Award and has won the Hankook Ilbo Literary Prize. Her new novel is called The Impossible Fairytale, and it is about 2 seemingly unexceptional grade school girls named Mia and the Child. Han and her agent just informed me that the book has been shortlisted for the PEN American Translation Prize. And I mean, you got the news 2 days ago, right? Congratulations, Han. Han, do you want to start reading?
My book is called The Impossible Fairytale, and this book is about the child abuse or child murder or something. I will talk about this later. The child is lucky. Before we talk about her good lucks, because several other children will soon be entering the scene, we need to address the matter of her name. The child's name is Mia. It could be Mina, or Minha, or it could be Ami, Yumi, or Yunmi. But since she thinks of herself as Mia, let's just call her Mia. Mia is lucky. One day, she receives a set of 72 German watercolor pencils from one of the 2 men who consider her to be their daughter. Mia has 2 fathers. One is not yet aware of the other's existence or pretends not to be, and the other is aware of the one's existence but chooses to turn a blind eye for some unknown reason. When a person discovers a truth that no one else knows, every surrounding relationship will change drastically. Nevertheless, even though they both function as fathers to Mia, only one of the 2 had given her a set of 72 German watercolor pencils. Because these pencils were manufactured in Germany and were not cheap ones made in China, they satisfied the taste and interest, enabling the father who gave the gift to gain leverage over the other father. Red, fuchsia, crimson, blood red, rose, yellow, orange yellow, citron, tangerine, fresh color, and light green, emerald, forest green, grass green. With such an overwhelming array of colors spread before her, lucky Mia gains the innocent and childish confidence that she'll be able to draw every object around her with 72 colors. When Mia traces the outline of an object with a gray pencil, when she is coloring the skin of an object with a blue pencil, Mia's mother realized that her daughter has become larger than her own shadow. Mia's mother loves Mia, and Mia was sick often, and each time she got sick, 5 shades of color would appear on her face: red, yellow, violet, green, and black. And Mia's mother made herself absent during her husband's absence. There would be a square of chocolate and a glass of orange juice by Mia's pillow, but not Mia's mother. Wet with sweat, in bed with a cold, Mia would rouse herself briefly to drink the orange juice and fall asleep again under the damp blanket. When her mother would return late at night and gaze down her sleeping daughter, because Mia is lucky, she would stir awake and ask her mother for a glass of cold water. After this sequence was repeated several times, Mia's face would once again turn white as milk and smooth as a baby's bottom. But when Mia's face turned dark as water and red as fire, when she recognized vaguely that the scene she was witnessing was losing some unknowable thing, the colors of objects became unfixed and began to waver. Therefore, every morning would become dark blue rage, the afternoon would become crimson and resignation, the evening would become gray silence, and the colors would all at once turn dark as night. These things happen whenever Mia is sleeping, whenever she is opening her journal, whenever she is engrossed in watching television, whenever she is climbing a jungle gym, whenever she is being warned that she is too young to drink coffee, whenever she is passing a note to the student sitting in front of her, and whenever she distractedly looks away, the objects return to their original color in perfect order. When I grow up, I'm going to buy a fountain pen, says Mia. Do you know you can kill someone with a fountain pen? She asks. I got that from a book. If you drop a pen from high up at the right angle, the pointed tip will pierce right into the person's head. It's because of acceleration. It was in a detective story. But of course, Mia has no desire to kill someone. In fact, she doesn't understand the words death or kill. She is a lucky child, and she lacks the passion, let alone the opportunity to kill someone. She doesn't yet know that people can kill even in the absence of emotions such as hatred. She doesn't yet know that rather than trying to aim the tip of a fountain pen at someone's skull from a tall building, it is far more effective to drive the pointed metal tip into someone's throat. A fact she would have learned if she had read more books. But she is interested only in detective novels. And because there are more things she doesn't know than she does know, her world is simple. And for that reason, she is lucky. Anyhow, I'm going to buy a fountain pen when I grow up, she says. I like the way it sounds, fountain pen. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Han. That was brilliant. Thank you. To my right here is Janice Pariat. Woo! She's got a fan following here. Janice is the author of Boats on Land, a collection of short stories, and Seahorse, a novel. She has been awarded the Crossword Prize for Fiction as well as the Sahitya Akademi Young Writer Award. Her novella, The Nine-Chambered Heart, was just published in India and will be published in the UK in May, right? Very exciting. In the Nine-Chambered Heart, In the Nine-Chambered Heart, 9 characters recall their relationship with the same young woman whom they have either loved or who has loved them. Janice, I would love for you to read something from there.
So, as Prajwal just briefly explained, the book, quite obviously actually, comprises 9 different voices, all talking about the same person who happens to be a woman that they've loved or who has loved them. So I'm going to read from a chapter, or a section rather, called The Caretaker. And this voice, this person, is much, much older than this young protagonist. This is how it starts. You're half my age, maybe younger, but I see you and I want you. I've felt it before, this kind of want. It's raw and easy and instantly recognizable, like hunger, and as uncomplicated, mouth to gut. At this time of night, it might be the alcohol. How much have I had to drink? Always one too many. In my head, There's a familiar lightness, and the hall in which this gathering is taking place has taken on a certain hazy glow. I see you clearly as you step into the room. You stand uncertainly for a moment, glance about you, and walk across to where the door opens into a lawn. You stop just before the glow of the burner. Why would you do that? It's December, it's cold, and your dress won't do much to keep you warm. It's a cross between kimono and lab coat. And on my wife, it would look like an eccentric bathrobe, but you, it suits. That touch of the dramatic. You seem to be a woman to whom something is always about to happen. I watch you, I sip my whiskey, and I'm called to your face. That nose, that sweep of brow, something about your chin. Your hair is long but swept deliciously away from your neck. You are pleasingly, not conspicuously, tall. As a child, you must have been awkward and gangly, but not now, not anymore. And if I were a poet, I would find a way to describe your body as it deserves to be. But all that comes to mind is a tree, a cypress, whose leaves shimmer in the sunlight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. Hey, would you like to read one more extract? You read so beautifully. Okay, all right, that's good. Thank you. To my extreme left is Leïla Slimani, whose second novel, Lullaby or The Perfect Nanny, was the most read book in France in 2016. It is well on its way to becoming the most read book anywhere in the world this year, because Leïla just told me she's sold 1 million copies of the book. How amazing is that, guys?
We've asked her for a party. You're all invited.
Leïla also did tell me that she isn't feeling too well, so thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know it's a lot for you, and would you like to read an extract? Yeah.
Yes, of course. So my book is the story of a young couple, a young Parisian couple, Paul and Miriam, who decide to hire a nanny for their children because Miriam is going back to work. And this nanny at the beginning of the book seems absolutely perfect. And the extract I'm going to read is a description of the Parisian playgrounds during the afternoons. Parks on winter afternoons. The drizzle scatters dead leaves. The icy gravel sticks to the children's knee. On benches, on narrow paths, you see those people the world doesn't want anymore. They flee cramped apartments, sad living rooms, armchairs sunk with the imprint of boredom and inertia. They prefer to shiver outside, shoulders hunched and arms crossed. At 4 p.m., idle days seem endless. It is now, in the middle of the afternoon, that you notice the wasted time, that you worry about the coming evening. At this hour, you are ashamed of being useless. Parks on winter afternoons are haunted by vagabonds, tramps, the elderly and unemployed, the sick, the vulnerable, those who do not work, who produce nothing, those who do not make money. In spring, of course, the lovers return. Clandestine couples find shelter under lime trees, but in winter, it's something else altogether. Around the icy slide, there are nannies and their army of children. Wrapped up in cumbersome pad jackets, the toddlers run like fat Japanese dolls, noses trickling snot, fingers violet. They breathe out white steam and stare at it, fascinated. In proms, babies held tight under straps contemplate their elder siblings. Perhaps some of them feel melancholic, impatient. They probably can't wait to be able to get warm by crawling up the wooden climbing frame. There are mothers too, mothers staring into space, like the one who gave birth recently and now finds herself confined to the world's edge, who, sitting on this bench, feels the weight of her still flabby belly. She carries her body of pain and secretions, her body that smells of sour milk and blood. This flesh that she drags around with her, which she gives no care or rest. They are smiling, radiant mothers, those extremely rare mothers, gazed at lovingly by all the children. The ones who did not say goodbye this morning, who didn't leave them in the arms of another. The ones set free by a day off work, who have come here to enjoy it, bringing a strange enthusiasm to this ordinary winter's day at the park. There are some men too, but closer to the benches, closer to the sandpit, closer to the little ones, the women form a solid wall, an impassable barrier. They are suspicious of men who come near, who take an interest in this world of women. The grandmothers deplore this, all those pedophiles around nowadays that didn't exist in my day.
Thank you so much, Leïla. I read this book in 4 hours and in one sitting, and clearly I'm not the only person to do so. 1 million copies, guys. Isn't that amazing? 1 million copies, damn it. I mean, wow. Well, you're on your way there. Yeah. So, Leïla, when you were about 9, your mother asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up. And your reply was, I want to think. Had you by this point made up your mind that you'd want to be a writer? When and how did you decide that words were what you'd make a living out of?
Actually, when I was a little girl, I was a reader. I think, like a lot of writers, I was a reader when I was a child, and I think that my first link to words was a link as a reader. And I must say that I feel sometimes a certain nostalgia for this time, for all these emotions I felt as a child discovering novels, discovering Dickens, Balzac, or Dostoevsky. It was really, really strong for me. And I wanted to be like those men. I wanted to be paid for thinking, for dreaming, for imagining another world, because I had the feeling that no life could be more valuable than a life where you can be paid for dreaming. And my parents actually were very supportive of this idea. My parents were admiring a lot writers, and they told me in a certain way that if you want to give a certain sense, a certain meaning to your life, there's no better way than being a writer. And my mother was obsessed by the idea that I was going to be a writer. Maybe because of a little poem I wrote when I was 7, and that she claims she still has this poem, but I'm sure it's not true. And she always told me, you're going to become a writer. So, sometimes I don't know if I became a writer just because I'm a good girl and I'm always doing what my mother tells me to do, or if she was right and maybe she knew my destiny better than me. But of course, I think that my parents had a great influence into me by the fact that they were looking at writers with a sort of fascination.
Wow, excellent. Do you remember what that poem was, the poem that you wrote as a 7-year-old?
Oh, yes, it was so stupid. It was about my death. It was the day of my funerals, and everyone was coming at my funerals. All my friends were crying, of course.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very stupid and very narcissistic, actually, for a 7-year-old girl. So I hope that my mother lost this poem because I don't want to see it anymore.
How fitting that the first sentence of Leïla's book should read, "The baby is dead." Yeah. Yeah. And Han, how about you? Yeah, no, I always get very giggly around Janice. It's the strange thing that she does, And Han, what about you? What was your, when did you discover you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, like Leïla, I was a reader when I was very young, and for young children, Korea is not that easy to live or to survive because there are so many competitions like that. So when I was a child, I I read really a lot, like world classic literatures, and I understood almost nothing because I was too young to understand something important. But yeah, it was good. And as a young children, Korean young children, there is only one advantage, I think, because Korean parents believe that reading makes their children can go a higher class or something. So yeah, my parents bought me lots of books. That was one good thing. Yeah, and then I wanted to write something. Yeah, after reading many books.
Excellent. And do you remember at what age you wrote your first poem or your first short story?
Yeah, I tried to write a short story when I was 12 or 13, and yeah, I have an image. I had an image to write, but when there was a paper on my desk, I couldn't write because I couldn't decide the tense or the perspective. So yeah, so I plagiarized something. Yeah.
Well, your book is so original. It is. I was talking to her about this earlier. I thought it had the most positively peculiar beginning to any book that I've read. And I see a lot of people in the audience nodding their heads. It's a great book. And clearly starting your literary career as a plagiarist helped you in the long run.
Yeah.
It did. Janice, you have been writing since the day you were born.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. And by the way, Janice, I also realized, has color coordinated her outfit with her book jacket. That's some work of genius there.
I'm going to say that wasn't planned, but no one's going to believe me.
Yeah. Tell us about how you discovered the magic of words.
Well, I think, first of all, that it's absolutely lovely that all of us are sitting here saying how we began as readers. And I teach a small creative writing course, and if my students are here, please remember, please remember that what I tell you about reading being really important when you want to write, that's true. Okay, it is just the most important thing, and honestly, that's the one thing that I would add to your stories, that I was reading a lot. I grew up in the wilds of Assam. In the 90s, there was nothing apart from libraries in all of these old colonial clubs amidst these tea estates, and I was just reading whatever dusty books I could find there. But for the longest time, I couldn't imagine myself a writer, actually, because I grew up in an India where that wasn't really an option. You could do very safe jobs like medicine or engineering or law, and it was hard to imagine yourself as a writer. I think that's what you need to make that leap at some point, that you don't really become a writer, but you imagine yourself a writer first. So it took me a long time to actually be able to think that way. And I think it was only after I left university, after studying literature and reading some more, that I decided, actually no, I was in a publishing house. I was an editor there, and I realized, wait, I can write better than these people.
Hey, what publishing house was it?
I am zipping my lips here. So yes, that's how this happened. But talking of plagiarism, when I was about 7 or 8, I don't know if any of you read Enid Blyton here. Oh, lots of hands for that. Yes, so I would steal everything, all her characters, all her settings, and I would take them back to my parents and say, I wrote this. And they could see right through the plagiarism, of course, but they just encouraged me and said, you're brilliant. We'll put this away in a folder. So very similar stories, which is nice.
Hey, Janice and I started our literary careers the same month of the same year. We had a collection of short stories out in December 2012. we both followed it with a novel, which came out around the same time again, yeah. And last time I saw Janice, I told her, my third book is going to take me 10 or 15 years. And she said, yeah, my third book is also going to take me 10 or 15 years. And before you knew it, her third book was out. What happened?
It's a very small book.
Well, no, but I mean, there's so much depth in it. I mean, clearly it wasn't written in 7.5 months, Janice. So what happened between then
That's
and...
very kind. I think this is a very urgent book. I don't know if that makes sense, but the idea sort of sprang into my head, and it was almost as though I was compelled to write it. Not that that made it easier to write, because the process is long and arduous, and you need tremendous amounts of patience and discipline to do that, no matter how thick or thin your book is. But it was a very urgent book at the time. It felt like it needed to be written and needed to be done with, because it had to make its way into the world now. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Han, you published 3 collections of short stories.
Yes.
Before writing a novel. How was the transition? What was your writing process like? How different was writing short stories from writing a novel? Which one did you like better?
Okay. In Korea, there is a kind of literary tradition that a writer must start with short stories. Because
okay. So we could be Korean.
Yeah, because
then.
in Korea it's so important to write a short story, because there are lots of literary magazine, quarterly literary magazine, and they only publish short stories. So all writers must start with short stories to earn names or earn reputation. And after that, I started to write a novel. And before I started, I was so afraid, because I couldn't believe myself that I can write a full-length novel, because I only did short stories. But anyhow, I wrote this, and I felt more freedom in novels, because I can tell or write whatever I want, but without any limit. So yeah, nowadays I'm focusing on novels than short stories. Short stories are so like a gem, because you have to cut and arrange something beautifully. But in novels, you can talk whatever you want.
Yeah.
I think.
So you think novels are far easier than writing short stories?
Not easy, but I feel more.
All right, Janice, how was it with you?
I think actually I don't really have a preference. I think for me what's important, and this is something that I tell my students as well, that the question that I ask myself before embarking on any sort of literary project is, how best can this story be told? So it could be in the form of a poem, it could be in the form of a short story or a novel or a big tome of a novel. So I think for me, the idea or the importance lies in honoring the story, in doing the story justice. How does it need to be told best? And I think that's really how I kind of decide between genres, not because I prefer one over the other.
Excellent. And Leïla, you've written 2 novels and a nonfiction book, right? Could you tell us a little about your nonfiction book?
Yes, this is a book about, the title of the book is Sex and Lies, Sexual Life in Morocco. And it's a book about women in Morocco who told me about their life, about their intimate life, about their sexuality. Because in Morocco, the laws about sexuality are very hard on people, because you don't have the right to have a sexual life before marriage. You can go to prison because homosexuality is forbidden, adultery is forbidden. You can also go to prison. There is a big problem of clandestine abortion. So it's very difficult for women nowadays, especially because at the same time, women are working more and more, getting more and more independent, having their own lives. Young people are getting married now at 28 or 30, so of course you can't ask them not to have a sexual life before marriage because they have. So everyone knows the situation, but there is a lot of hypocrisy. So what I wanted, because I think that's the role of a writer, is to say to people that you have to break the silence. And I think that today one of the most important things for women is to break the silence in a certain way, to say that and to express the fact that we don't have to be ashamed, that this shame is coming from outside and that we have to take this like a burden. But when we get rid of this burden, we feel free and we can emancipate ourselves. So all those women, they confessed to me, so I tried to be a good ear for them and then a voice and help them to express all their feelings and try to fight for the right of every woman to be themselves and to be free.
You know, Leïla, there's something very interesting that you said in one of your interviews that... you know, something very interesting that you said in one of your interviews when someone asked you if your first novel was autobiographical. You've said, because I am North African and I didn't want to identify myself uniquely with that, my novel is not autobiographical. You're going to imprison yourself when you have in front of you a much larger horizon. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
You know, there is a sort of unspoken tradition in the Maghreb literature, and the tradition is that the first novel has to be a sort of autobiography, and you have to speak about your childhood, about the fact that you're Muslim, about identity problems, about immigration. So it was, I knew exactly what people were waiting and expecting from me, and of course I didn't want to give them what they expect, because it was too easy, and I was afraid of being imprisoned in this tradition. And also, you know, I think it's very important for us, people coming from the other world, not from the Western world, to say that it's not because we are Moroccan or Indian or from Afghanistan or Korea that we have to write about our countries and politics and identity. And it's not because you're a Muslim that you have to write about veil and honor and blood. That sometimes when you're a Muslim woman from Morocco, you want to write about love, about sex, about China, that we can be universal too. We have the world inside us like everyone. And I'm fed up with this tradition. So that's what I wanted to do.
Janice, this morning at about 3:30, when we were discussing our session at a lovely party in one of the palaces in Rajasthan, I threatened you that I would introduce you as Janice Pariat from the Northeast, ladies and gentlemen. And you very eloquently said to me, I am going to be really pissed off if you do that. Could you talk a little bit about the pigeonholing that writers like you and I might have suffered from in the initial stages of our career by virtue of where we come from?
I think, to be very honest, exactly what Leïla said is so easily transferable to this situation where we happen to be from the Northeast, and hence everything we write has to spring from that region. It has to, in a way, tell the story of our communities. It has to sort of deal with all the turbulence, the political sort of upheavals that have happened in that region. And this is not to say that that's not important. And I think, you know, there are writers there who are very, very rooted to the places that they come from, and they bolster, you know, their identities, their writerly identities, through, you know, their stories from their own sort of homeland, their home region. For me, I kind of come from everywhere. I have a very mixed heritage, and yes, my first book happened to be very anchored to the places where I grew up, in Shillong, in Meghalaya, and Assam. But that didn't mean that that was the only thing that I would ever write about. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, I think there is more freedom in the West to be universal. You can be a Wes Anderson and claim an imaginative space that's nowhere. But for the rest of us, we're constantly either writing back to the empire, or we're constantly sort of writing about the places that we come from and the social sort of political problems that, you know, our communities have faced. But I think we need to claim that imaginative freedom too. We have a right to forget where we come from. It's really important, because then you're letting writers do what they want to do. Because then they can follow the stories that they want to tell, no matter where those stories come from. This is literature. We don't have visas and passports. Thank God for that.
And if I just can add something, I think there is a link with the fact that we are readers. When I was a little girl in Rabat, in Morocco, reading Tolstoy, I was feeling Russian. I had the feeling that I was Anna Karenine. And I can remember I was reading Pearl Buck, and I said to my mother, I want to drink Yasmin tea. And I was like acting like I was in China, because I could feel what the characters were feeling. And when you love reading, you can understand also that you are, at the end of the day, you're just a human being feeling the same emotion all over the world. And it's very important to claim this.
Thank you, Leïla. That was beautiful. Janice, could that be the reason why there is absolutely no geographical anchorage in The Nine-Chambered Heart? Like this book could be based anywhere in the world. Was that a deliberate attempt to distance yourself from the northeastern landscape?
A little bit. I mean, I think I can't deny that this was a bit of a rebellious book. So, like I mentioned, my first book is very deeply geographically anchored in the Northeast. My second book retells a Greek myth in London and Delhi, and people had no clue what to do with that, or where to slot it, or how to label it. And this one kind of takes off even further from there. Like Prajwal said, there are no recognizable geographical markers at all. There are no names. Everyone is nameless. The cities are nameless. The countries are nameless. But beyond this sort of rebellious streak, I think for me what was in my mind while writing was, is there any story that can survive this kind of geographical loosening? What are the stories that can be geographically unanchored? We know them. We know fairy tales. We have our myths that travel, our 1001 Nights that have traveled across borders. These are stories that sit very lightly. And I think that's what I was a little obsessed with. What does this do to a story, this geographical unanchoring? How do those stories survive? Do they survive? Do they change? How can we tell them? Yeah.
Thanks, Janice. Han, you write in Korean,
Yes.
and your book has been translated into English.
Uh-huh.
I'm very curious about what the translation process was like. Would love to know about the kind of collaboration that happened between you and the translator.
Yeah, I was lucky to meet my translator, whose name is Janet Hong, and we met like 10 years ago. So she translated my short stories into English.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, it was very convenient for me because she can speak or write me in English, and I can speak or write to her in Korean. So yeah, she is a Korean Canadian, so it was so nice and smooth process. And yeah, and every morning during this translation process, she sent me a like tons of emails, like not every day. I'm exaggerating, but yeah, she sent emails a lot, and each time I checked her emails, I was a little bit embarrassed because at then I finally realized how many holes I made in this novel. Yeah, and she understood quite enough, and yeah, it was nice. Yes,
Okay, excellent. I would love to talk about your weaknesses as writers. We all have weaknesses. The minute I need to do some descriptive writing, I begin getting palpitations. I clam up. Leïla, do you want to talk about your weaknesses? What do you think are your stumbling blocks when you write?
You know, I think, I don't know how to say it in English, is to find le souffle, which means writing something that would be very, very long with a lot of characters, like writing a sort of a Tolstoy novel. I think that I don't have today the strength, I don't have the patience, I don't have the ability to write this. It would be, I think, very difficult for me, and also that maybe it would be very difficult for me to write a sort of patrimonial book, a book that belongs to really to a country or to an identity. And maybe it would be very difficult for me because I don't feel myself very rooted to any country, so it would be very difficult.
Do you write every day?
No.
You don't. Okay. All right. Janice, weaknesses?
I think exactly the same, actually. I can't imagine writing a Tolstoyan novel. I'm in awe of Eleanor Catton because, you know, she managed to put together this incredibly intricate, massive book, and I don't think I have the literary stamina for that yet. Who knows? One day. But definitely something much, much longer, I think, would really intimidate me. But who knows? Maybe there is a story that we must tell in that way and nowhere else. Yeah.
Anne?
Sorry, what was it?
Weaknesses? What do you? Yeah.
It's just from.
Sorry.
Witness?
As in, do you think you are bad at certain things when you write?
Yeah, actually. As a writer, I cannot make my own living, so I have to work.
Okay.
And I give lectures or something, so I don't have much time. So, yeah, so I write usually at midnight till dawn, I think.
Okay.
And drinking is also a problem for me. I have to drink before if I start to write. Yeah, and. I'm impressed. Yeah, so I have to sometimes stop my writing because I have to work or I have to meet someone else. So I think I decide to live long, like 100 years. Yeah, then I will write something good enough or something great when I will be old enough. Or
92.
Yeah, 92, yeah.
And Leïla, what is your writing process like? Do you do what she does, start writing at midnight and write until the crack of dawn, or with copious amounts of alcohol, or no?
Oh, you know, yeah, alcohol, all the drugs that I can find are okay. If they help me to write, I take everything. You know, when I begin a novel, I write all the time. All the time, from the moment I wake up to the moment I sleep. And at the end of the novel, I have to go away, and I go to my house in the country, and I stay there for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks completely alone, and then I go a little bit crazy. And I like this. I lose the sense of time. I lose the sense of reality. I lose everything. And I wake up sometimes at 4 in the morning, and I eat. I work, and then I go to sleep. So it's completely a mess. But I need to be in a certain way outside of reality, to be in my own reality. And I love this this very concentration that you have when you write and when you live with your characters. So that's what I'm trying to find, is to be with my characters, to feel them, to meet them.
And Janice?
Yeah, I have actually a really quick question for the two of you, if that's okay. Just because we've talked about, expectations at a sort of a national, regional level, I was wondering if there are also expectations that you find are placed on you because you're women writers, which is a phrase that should not even exist. But have you sort of felt that kind of pressure, that you're a woman and hence you should be sort of, dealing with certain kinds of stories or telling certain kinds of stories? Just intrigued.
One day I remember that someone told me, "Wow, I loved your book. It was so good. I thought it was a man who wrote it." I was like, "Okay, thank you very much." So no, I didn't have this kind of expectation. But at the same time, one day my mother came to a presentation that I made, and a young woman, a young student, it was in Morocco, came and she began to speak with my mother, and she asked my mother, "Are you angry against your children? Did you fight when she published a book?" And my mother said, "No, we didn't fight. I'm very proud of the book." And she said, "Oh, okay, because I could never write because I'm too afraid that my parents won't understand and that they would think that it's very, it's not very moral to write and to say what I think, and I have to stay prude." So I began to think that maybe for a lot of women in a lot of parts of the world, it's very difficult, the idea that, yes, I can take a pen and a paper and just express myself without thinking of what people are going to think of me, that people are not going to judge me, and writing maybe about sex, about love, about whatever I want. So I feel very strong thing. As a woman, I have to write because I have to tell other women, you can take a paper and a pen and say whatever you want because we are going to read you and we are not going to judge you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, in Korea it's almost the same. But in this kind of festival, when I asked about how is the life of being a writer in Korea, I always say like this: as a woman writer, it's so easy because male writers, their writing is not so good. So, yeah, Korean male writers, and yeah. We still have a problem because all the people who have powers or in higher status are all males in Korea, like judges or critics. So yeah, women must write more and more, and they have their voice in the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Janice, before we open the floor for questions, do you want to share with the audience this very flattering review you received for the Seahorse, I think,
Yes.
and which should give everyone an idea of how much more difficult it is for women writers?
So
Yeah.
similar to Leïla, who was told, "My God, this book is so good, I thought it was written by a man." There was a review on my second book, Seahorse, which said, "Oh, she is a young girl, but she sounds like a white Western philosopher." So let's just leave it there.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for questions. There are volunteers with mics everywhere. Could this gentleman in the front have the first question? Could you also let us know who the question is for when you ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you, four of you, for a wonderful, insightful discussion. I found a lot of insights there. And this is in relation to what Janice and Leïla talked about. Like you said, you write and then you just keep writing, and how it was hinted that your novel was not written in 7.5 months, it took more time. So my question is, should a writer write when he's inspired, or does it help even when that inspiration wave has gone by and you're kind of milking on it or sitting on it, or should you just write because once the time passes, it's gonna go downhill from there? So just write whatever inspiration is left. So what's the balance? Thanks.
Leïla?
Actually, there's different type of writing. You can say that you write for a novel and you really concentrate on writing. So that's a certain type of writing. But I write actually every day. I have my notebook, and every day I write something. But I don't call it writing because it's not for a novel. It's just some notes that I'm taking. But every day you have, I think, what we didn't say is that writing is work. 99% of work and 1% of inspiration, talent, and else. But the most important thing is working every day, having a discipline, thinking every hours of the day of what I am going to write, to embrace all the anxiety that you feel by the idea of, oh my God, I have to open my computer and begin writing this novel. So it's a lot of pleasure, but it's also a lot of discipline and a lot of anxiety. I love writing and I hate writing. I would love not to be a writer, and I couldn't be something else than a writer.
The lady out there wearing, sorry, I can't see what you're wearing, but yeah, there you go. Yeah.
My question's actually for the whole panel, but maybe Leïla. Specifically, you talked about how you all feel the need to kind of sometimes step outside consciously of your ethnic and religious, maybe sometimes geographical identities to claim a larger global space. But do you also feel, because you also spoke about your voice as women, do you also feel the need to step out of that voice, or do you feel more empowered by it? And I mean it in the context of, I think, because you're so consciously trying to step out of other identities that bind you in some ways, do you find that you embrace your voice as a woman in your perspective of the world as a woman, or do you still want that also to stay neutral when you write?
I think we should not be imprisoned by this idea of being a woman voice, but at the same time, you have to think that for centuries, women couldn't write, women couldn't publish. A woman who wanted to publish needed to take a man's name if she wanted to be published. I won the Goncourt Prize, and one of the brothers Goncourt said, if a woman is a genius, it means she's a man. He was very misogynistic, as all the literature world at this time. So as a woman, I feel the duty to repair in a certain way and to write for all the women who wanted to write for centuries and to express and who couldn't. So for me, it's a kind, it's not a privilege, but it's something that I want to really to focus on the fact that I can tell the story of what it is to be a woman today, what it is to have a body of a woman, what it is to be a mother, what it is to feel as a woman in our world. Because for a very, very long time, we don't have the testimony of the women of all those centuries. It's very important for us now to testify of what it is to be a woman.
I think it was Virginia Woolf who said Anonymous was a woman. So yes, completely in agreement with you. Just to add to that though, I'm going to steal something that Tishani Doshi said yesterday when she was talking about her dance and this particular dance that she'd been doing for 15 years, which was physically very, very grueling, and how this dance actually compelled her and her dance partner to move beyond the idea of a gendered body, that it kind of pushed them into an androgynous space, that in a way it also gave them a freedom. So I think while we do all of this in complete agreement with Leïla, it's also important to kind of to push beyond that, that yes, we need to come to a point when we don't even need to do this anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Han, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, as a woman writer, I always feel like, no, as a woman, I always feel like there is one more or hundreds of barriers or like invisible barriers. So like the ceiling or the fences or the bottom of the, like this place. So yeah, I think as a writer, we should destroy the older barriers to, first we make them feasible, and then we have to destroy them.
Thank you. We have time for 3 more questions. The gentleman in red, yeah, he is a very enthusiastic question asker.
Hello, ladies, sir. My question is a general one, and I'm very sure it's been asked before. So that you reminded me of Virginia Woolf, and there's a very famous essay, A Room of One's Own. And then there's this writer called, by the name of Janet Winterson, who used to live in a car, I guess from the age of 15 or 16, and she used to write since then. She again had the kind of space for a writer where we did not have interference, or maybe the intersection of a writer with a familiar life, the life with a family, or the people you live with. So as writers, like when I heard Miss Han speak about how she writes from midnight till maybe early morning, or how you sometimes wake up at 4 in the morning with no sense of time, how do you deal with the fact that sometimes we still are living with either parents or a spouse or a partner or brother or friends? How do you deal with that? In fact, it's a very general question. How do you all deal with it?
You know, I've always thought that it would be very interesting one day to do a panel not with writers, but with writers' companions. And I think that you could hear a lot of things, because I think they suffer a lot. You know, actually, when I write a novel, sometimes my husband is speaking to me and I'm looking at him and I don't listen to what he's telling me, because I'm thinking about my characters. And actually, even if I'm doing some efforts, but I don't care of what he's telling me, and I don't care of anything. The only things that I care about is my book. So I must say, I think that writers are a little bit selfish when we are writing, but we have to be, because you have to be selfish and a little bit crazy to wake up every day with this idea, I'm going to stay 10 hours writing about someone who doesn't exist, and no one cares about this person that doesn't exist, but it's the most important thing for me. And you have to fight against all the things that will keep you out of writing, because life doesn't go with writing. You always have something more important to do. You always have to take your children from school. You have to cook something. You have to meet friends. But you have to fight if you want to write. So every time I say to my husband, thank you for being so understanding, because I know I'm a pain in the ass when I write a novel, but I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, when he reads the book, he's happy and a little bit proud. So that's what counts.
Just to add to that, I think the worry that the people I live with have is not so much, oh, crazy routine, but how much of this is going into your novel? We want to know.
Yeah, the little girl, yeah.
My question is for Janice ma'am. How to be a good writer?
Oh, I think, okay, you're never going to leave, any of you. You'll be here forever. Such a good question. Such an infinitely difficult question. What to say? There are so many ways to be a good writer. I think you have to begin by being a good reader, and imagining that you can create similar worlds that other readers would love to get lost in. I think you begin with the dream. It doesn't even sometimes begin with the words. I think it begins with the dream of imagining these fantastical or ordinary places that other people would love to get lost in. anyone wants to add to that?
I don't know if I knew a way to be a good writer. Now I would be a good writer. So I will be someday. But I think your writing will be in the sum of what you read. So I think the best way to be a good writer is reading. So then reading is more important than writing, I think.
We have time for one last question. Could we go to somebody in the back? Yeah, maybe the gentleman in blue. Yeah.
Janice, all your narrators. Hello? Janice, all your narrators in the book are writers. I'm sure it's not a mere coincidence. Was it a choice done by purpose, or do you believe only writers make lovers, or failed lovers for that matter?
Well, it does so happen that one of the main characters in Seahorse, which is the book previous to this, and the central silent character here turn out to be writers. I did try to make them other things, but they were so stubborn. And they just wouldn't be interior designers, they wouldn't be potters, they wouldn't be veterinarians. I really did try, but they just had their way by the end of it. I think with my short stories, though, there's a wealth of other people. So I do hope that, after you've sort of maybe gone through all of these books, if you do, it might seem to open up a little bit more. But with this particular character, she refused. She was like, I'm going to be a writer. You can try and do whatever you want with me, but that's it. That's what I'm going to be. And so it happened.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, everybody. We are out of time. The authors will be signing copies of their books in the signing tent, which is where? Where is the signing tent? Okay. Janice, unfortunately, has to run to another session, so she'll be available to sign your books only after the session. Where's your session happening? At Darbar Hall. But do follow the authors to the tent and talk to them. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, guys.